Thank you so much. I have got to start by saying it's a bloke, an International Women's Day event. And I think hats off, actually, to David, because, you know, we all leave here every single year. We all leave really empowered, and we pick something up and we leave just a little bit more inspired. But the reality is yes, we can go away and make the changes, but we actually can't do it without the blokes as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to share the stage this year with the first man at the core International Recruitment Day. So I'm going to start, and it isn't all about. It's not all going to be one way. I promise. I promise. But you run in hospitality the biggest bar and pub group in the world. That's a lot. When you took that role, because you came from BrewDog, so when you took that role, did you think about the responsibility from the perspective of diversity? Is that a weight that you carried, or was that an opportunity? What did you think about, and what have you done?
Yeah, well, it's an awesome place to start, and the short answer, which I'm going to spend a few minutes elaborating on, is that I absolutely categorically did. Building BrewDog from, we had 100 or so employees when I first joined that business, to where it was when I left kind of 4 years ago. The one thing that I'm most proud of was the nature of the diverse talent within that organization. So it's probably the most diverse team that I've worked with in terms of gender, socioeconomic background, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. So when I got the opportunity to run Stonegate, and incidentally had massive imposter syndrome at that point in time, and really, questioned whether or not that scale of leadership challenge was right, or was the right time, or so on and so forth. I had my Glaswegian grandmother in my head who raised me saying, "What's for you won't go past you." And I thought, I'm going to throw myself at this. But I'd always worked in pubs, and started working in a bar at 18 part-time. Didn't get a degree, flunked university, started working full-time to help my grandmother who was raising me to pay the mortgage, and had a very kind of working class Glaswegian but happy background. So I knew a lot about every aspect of the pub sector all the way through those roles. And one thing was very, very clear to me, and that was that with very few exceptions, and we just heard from one, there weren't that many pioneering, phenomenal female leaders. And actually it was a very, very male-dominated environment.
Still is, actually.
Yeah, and absolutely still is, right? And what I saw when I was growing up in those businesses was teaching me that I had to act and behave in a particular way to be a successful leader in pubs or in hospitality. Teaching me that how you act is more important than the outcome. That often felt like the way it was. It often felt like if you can project yourself as strong and powerful and in control, and you can kind of bash the table and make a decision, then that was almost more important than the outcome. And through my leadership journey, I learned that actually the complete opposite of that is the most effective way to run a business. So when I started at Stonegate and realized relatively quickly that our strategy had to quite radically change, given everything that had happened in the world, I really thought the best way for it to radically change is to think about building a culture and a leadership team that has inclusivity baked in to how we go about our business. And we have made some real strides forward in that. We certainly have a long, long way to go, but it was a conscious decision that the right thing to do and the right commercial thing to do was to build a diverse leadership team that would think differently about running a quite traditional business, and would help us bring creativity and innovation and challenge to how we run that business.
And have you found over the years as a male leader, do you see women put themselves, do we turn up to work different? Have you seen it that actually when, I mean, I read a Harvard study about women only put themselves forward for a role when they are like 110% ready for it, but actually men will do it when they're about 50, 60%. They're like, yeah, I'll take that big promotion. Have you seen that? Is that, you know, is there more that we can also do, is in terms of, back to Karen's point of confidence, is it that we need to step forward more, as well as leaders also give us a safe environment where we can step forward?
I think it's a joint conversation to an extent. I think us talking about this topic today is a good step forward to having a joint conversation. I think the more that joint conversation happens, the more that we will drive pace and change, and we're not seeing enough pace and change. But I think it's very, very important to think about the leadership behaviours and culture that create an environment in which women leaders feel that it's not all on their shoulders in terms of how they show up, in inverted commas, but they're given the opportunity to contribute in a way that is flexible, it's collaborative, that has inclusivity at the core of the values of the business, and that recognises that the traditional way of thinking about how boards should operate, how executive teams should operate, isn't necessarily the right way to go about things. So I think it's twofold, but I think there's a huge onus on, in terms of the right interventions, leadership behaviour across the organisation is right up there. And I think because of my slightly unusual route to CEO and the fact that I'm a massive introvert, I have this like a slight, it's tiny slight window into sometimes how it might feel moving into an environment or into a boardroom where you don't feel confident or comfortable. And I recognised early on that for the great female talent that was coming through the ranks or that we were bringing into the business, that I had to pay more attention as a leader to making sure that they felt sponsored, empowered and supported to be successful. And I think I need to do more of that. I think if other male leaders did more of that, then that environment would feel better.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I certainly, when I look back, it's, for me, one of the most, I guess, the moment where I kind of thought, you're not Sarah the Small from Stoke, you know, which was kind of this little sort of, the little monkey on my shoulder for life was, I mean, it still stays there like it does with everybody, but when I was at Pizza Express in my 20s, I shared an office with the CEO, David Page, and really great guy, actually, and I must have driven him insane. I used to run the international department, and I was going to leave, and he'd said, no, come and work for us and do sort of special projects, which is actually a great job when things are good, and first job to get made redundant when things aren't good. But anyway, it was really good fun. And I shared an office with him for almost a year, and during that we were PLC at the time, and during that period, I asked him so many questions. I was like a sponge. And I'd held them all upon a pedestal and just thought, these really clever blokes, like they're just so smart. They all really know what they're doing. And I'm just this tiny little person who will never really understand it. Anyway, I spent a year with them and thought, oh, they're not that smart. Like, I actually really get it. Like, I actually understand. Not only do I understand this beautiful, simple, replicable business model, which was at the core of Pizza Express, but I also understood that they'd floated a business and why they used equity and why they used debt and how that they structured it. And getting to the end of that, I thought, oh my God, well, blow me down. I reckon I can do it.
Was that the point where you thought, I can genuinely do this?
It was the moment when I thought, you're not actually all, it's not magic. I actually get it. And it was such a gift to be able to share the time, and actually listening to you talk then, and you saying that you lean into actually spending that one-on-one time sometimes with women is, and I actually think this with a lot of people. I mean, I'm very, very blessed at Nightcap. We have 80% of our senior team is women. It's a business founded by women, run by women. It's just full of absolutely brilliant women. Anyway, which is great. But and one of the things that I try and do all the time is demystify. It's not that hard, but we all think it's hard. And there's lots and lots of people that sit in rooms that want to make it sound really, really hard. And one of the things that I did, actually as a result of sharing the office with David, was I started to be the person in the room to say, oh, I don't understand. Could you explain that to me? Because I'd been so confident after a whole year of asking questions and learning and going back and asking more questions and learning again, that I realised actually these questions aren't stupid. And what I also realised is a lot of the time, the people I was asking, somebody saying to somebody, that sounds really complicated, could you please distill it for me and make it much simpler? Often they couldn't. And there's lots of people are paid a lot of money to make it look really complicated. And I think that was the biggest gift that I had very early on, was that sort of demystification where I realised, oh, it's not that hard.
I think it's a great leadership trait to be able to take something very, very complex and understand the simple nuts and bolts of it. And I think, if I think back to my journey of thinking I had to behave like individuals that were in senior leadership positions as I moved through the ranks, and then realizing that, you know, my path was unconventional. Therefore, the more that I was myself, the more that I would encourage individuals who are progressing through the business to be themselves, and prepared to ask the silly question, or the question where you don't, more often than not, when we were in a room as a leadership team and as a board, it's a noisy conversation. Often it's me that's the person that doesn't understand. And being prepared to say, listen, I just don't get it, you're going to have to explain that to me in layman's terms, gives everyone the right and the license and the authority to do that, I think.
Yeah, I think it's creating those safe spaces where no question is a stupid question, and that anybody, male or female actually, anybody feels that they can step forward. And I definitely feel in our business that I don't think any of us actually almost see gender. I think we just thrive in an environment. Of course, there's lots we can do better. Always lots you can do better. Always, always. But we definitely thrive in an environment where it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, anything. You can thrive. You can. But you do have to get up. You have to graft. You have to work hard. And then when you achieve, it will be rewarded.
You talked about that experience with David and Pizza Express. There must be the opposite of that. What were the experiences where you felt, hold on, I'm being totally written off here, I'm being really underestimated here, and how did that frame you and shape your approach?
So that's a really good question, actually. I think we often get since Dragon's Den, it kind of is the opposite, actually. I walk into a room, people think, oh my God, she's going to she's going to try and steal the deal. And I think I wind people up before I walk into a room now, and I have to do completely the opposite, where I have to just go, no, promise I'm really normal, and I was the nice one. But years ago, and actually before Dragon's Den, I would always be underestimated in a room, and people would, I'm northern working class female, and you would walk into a room and people would just automatically write you off. There was an experience when I was in my 20s, when I was doing the special projects thing for Pizza Express, and we were buying Kettners in Soho. And I walked into the room, and I was 2 minutes late. I'm always 2 minutes late for everything. I walked into the room, and the other side was sat the opposite side, and I walked in, put my bag down, and the guy sat on the opposite side, the lawyer, didn't look up, and said, "Mine's white with one sugar." And I think, I don't know, 26, I think, at the time. And I put my bag down, and I walked over to the coffee machine, and I made him his coffee. And I said, would anybody else like a coffee? And actually, I don't think anybody else had breathed in the entire room for about 5 minutes while I was making the coffee. And I made myself a coffee, and I sat back down and looked across and said, well, should we start the meeting? And as I said that, I watched the colour drain from this guy's face. And it was such an empowering learning for me, because I realised right then that this actually a bit of imposter syndrome, but also being underestimated was an absolute superpower. I walked out with the deal that day. He didn't. He was completely on the back foot. I was so nice, so pleasant. I didn't rub his nose in it once at all, but I walked out with the deal. And it never left me. I mean, the story could have been quite different. I could have just punched him in the face and walked out, couldn't I? But that's not how the story went.
A round of applause for that.
Yeah, exactly. But it was such an amazing moment because it made me realise that all of those times after that, when I walked into a room and I was just worried, like I just thought, they all. I'm an imposter. This is, Mom, they're definitely going to find me out this time. No, really, this is the one. This is the one. No, our Sarah, you always say that. This is not the one. No, this is the one. And actually, I learned that even if it was the one, that was on them, actually. And I was able to, it made me stand just a little bit taller as I walked into meetings and just feel a little bit more confident to remember the moment when the guy actually completely misjudged me, but I walked out with a deal, no skin off my nose. And it stayed with me for a long, long time. So I think we all, I bet every single person in this room has got an example of times when they have been underestimated, where they've walked in, and you probably have as well.
Yeah, lots. And I remember, there's one that really sticks in my head, and I remember going to have a conversation with a headhunter about a pretty senior role, and I met the most kind of senior person in the recruitment company who I hadn't met before, and sat down, probably looking quite similar to this, slightly younger. And the first thing that person said to me was, "You don't look like a CEO." How did you recover from that?
I
knew it was a pivot. I was crushed for a start, but I knew it was a pivotal moment, and I thought, well, actually, if this is to prove to be an organisation that I want to be involved with, then how I deal with this moment is really very, very important. And I very quietly and calmly explained why my background, the fact that I hadn't turned up in a three-piece suit, the fact that I wasn't degree educated, and the fact that I'd done every single role in hospitality from part-time bartender to MD COO, made me a very, very good candidate to be a CEO. And it didn't really matter how I dressed for the interview.
So I'm thinking of time. Am I doing well? Oh yeah, very
conscious of time.
I normally will waffle on forever. So I think what would be really, if you look back, you're in such an important position in our industry, an industry that's so male dominated, where it's full of fabulous women, but still we don't have the representation on boards. We actually still don't have the representation in senior management that we should have. What does great look like to you when you look back and you go, I did that? I ran the largest bar and pub company in the world, and that's the mark that I made on diversity. If we come back in 5 years' time and we're all sat in this room and you're sat back here, what does great look like to you?
Yeah, I would start by saying that the inch by inch improvements all start to add up, and right now I'm really proud to say that half of the operational directors in our leased and tenanted business, a very, very male-dominated part of the sector. Half in our franchise business and half in our managed business are all talented, brilliant, inspirational female leaders. And that half of our leadership team is female. At board level, we're 2 out of 7. But that last 3 years of intentional work has been about starting to build the right diverse talent pipeline. So I think, when asked about the business and that similar question, I often say, I kind of just want to leave it in better shape than I found it. In terms of this, I think that it has been a very intentional decision to think carefully about building a diverse talent pipeline, inclusive leadership, different kind of culture to perhaps how traditional pubco businesses have been run for quite some time. And with all humility, I think if any of that rubs off on the sector as a whole, and we're going to continue to press the agenda, then I think we can make a genuine difference. What I would hope is that this really becomes more of a joint conversation, that there's some more guys in the room this time next year contributing to that conversation, and that my peers who are male leaders understand that you don't have to have a fully formed, glossy, completed action plan to join the conversation. You need to have a willingness to do the right thing, and understanding that the right thing is also the right commercial thing. And be prepared to join a conversation, ask questions and learn. I mean, I joined the board of Whittle last year. Part of that was to help a little bit. Part of that was to learn more about what I could do in terms of making a difference. We're both supporters of Boardwalk. It was the same thing. I get as much out of that as I put in, because I'm learning about ways that I can challenge myself to do more on this topic. And we are starting to see that the performance of our business is very positively impacted by those decisions on inclusivity and equity. And I hope that more leaders recognise that and join the conversation.
I mean, I think it's a complete no-brainer for me. Like, when actually so many of our customers are women. Like, you've got boards that are all men when 70% of their customers are women. I'm like, that in no world makes any sense, right? That how can that board possibly understand their consumers when 70% of them are women?
The type of business that you run right now, think about how in years gone by, and I think it's important that we don't speak to the detriment of how these businesses were run before, but think about the types of individuals that might have been leading and influencing those businesses, and how far away they were from what the guests and the customers actually look like. It's quite staggering, to be honest, and I think that more and more people will hopefully realise that this is just very, very smart commercial thinking.
Yeah, and I think that's the point, is it is very smart commercial thinking. It makes, in my mind, you have to have the diversity, not just of male and women, but I have to have diversity that helps you to understand the customers that you are serving at the end. And one thing that I think, and I'll just finish on it, is to say that does take deliberate and conscious action. Like, it isn't easy to do. We know that, otherwise we wouldn't all be sat here chatting about it. It can't be easy. So it does take, and it also takes people like you running businesses of your size to make deliberate, conscious choices that result in us having much more balance on the board and much more balance in our senior teams. So well done to the bloke in the room.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Sarah.
you. Thank you.